All right, good afternoon. I'm so glad that you could join me. This is Rob Hunt, the clerk of the House, and we're going to talk a bit about behind the scenes of the House chamber and the legislative process. So thanks, Rob. I'm happy to have you introduce yourself.
Well, thanks for having me. My name is Rob Hunt, and I am the clerk of the Maine House of Representatives. And before that, I was Representative Rob Hunt. So in 2008, I was elected for my first term from the towns of Buxton and Hollis, District 131. I was reelected in 2010, and after that, I switched to the staff side where I became assistant clerk from 2012 to 2014. And then since then, I've been clerk of the Maine House of Representatives. And we're thrilled that people take an active interest in state government. Usually we have a large group of folks in the House chamber, but with the present situation, we can't do that, which is a little bit of a shame, but I'm happy to describe how things work in the Maine House of Representatives. We have 151 members. Each one will represent about 9,000 people. And we take that very seriously. People's votes are very important. And, back when I was a member, I was a teacher, and the kids would always ask me, what do you do at the State House? And I would reply, we make the law. And that's not a joke, it's serious. We do make the laws, and the laws we make at the State House will probably have more of an impact on people's everyday lives than, say, the federal government. At the State House, we talk about number of days you have to go to school, some of the things you have to study while you're at school, driving ages, college assistance, tuition programs, that sort of thing. I distinctly remember one time talking about making the whoopie pie the state dessert. It did not become the state dessert. As silly as that seems, for the whoopie pie industry, it was a big deal, the way to promote their product. But of course, the Maine blueberries didn't like that. They wanted to be the Maine state dessert. And so in 2010, we had a big argument on the House floor about what the Maine state dessert would be. And as it turned out, the Maine state dessert is the wild Maine blueberry pie, whereas the whoopie pie is the Maine state treat. And so as you can see, there's a lot of ways to get around some of these thorny issues. And like I said, all joking aside, for some folks, that's very important business for them. And so we have to take all these things seriously. And sometimes in the public, it's not portrayed that way. It's us sort of bantering about some things that are not important, but they are important to some folks. What we do at the State House is we do group decision-making on an extreme scale. And what we have to do is get 151 people in a room and make decisions. And, the example I always give at Girls' Day is, well, let's pretend that we had to decide on one type of ice cream to eat. And, and usually I open it up to the floor and somebody yells out chocolate, somebody yells out vanilla, somebody yells out Rocky Road, whatever it is, right? And then we have to come up to a decision about one type of ice cream. And you can imagine that, towards, as people are shouting it out, they actually start arguing with each other about which type. But we can only choose one. So we're just talking about ice cream though, And then you get the whole sort of thought, well, what about the people who are lactose intolerant? Why are we even buying ice cream? Why are we going through these motions? But we have to come to a decision. It is a group decision-making process. And we try to keep it simple. Every question that is asked in the House is a yes or no question. Should we send this bill to XYZ committee? Should we send this bill to the other chamber? Should we pass this bill? Should we throw this bill in the trash can? They're all yes or no questions in the House chamber. And it's a huge room. If you've never been there, lots of chairs, lots of woodwork. It's very ornate. And it's kind of an interesting place to work every day. But as you can imagine, with 151 people in the room, it can get loud and that sort of thing. So we have a lot of rules about what you can and cannot do in the House chamber. And that's part of where I come in. My job is to be the custodian of all the bills. So I keep track of them and I make sure they don't get lost. I make sure that they're going to the right place, whether they're in the House or the Senate. And I'm also the parliamentarian, which means I'm the referee when people squabble about what the rules say and don't say. And so in that role, it's a very interesting role because I do have my opinions, but it would be against the decorum of the House to express them. I have to be apolitical. My job is to be fair and consistent, and it's not easy all the time. I hear some outrageous things that will make my blood boil, but I can't express anything about it. I just keep my head down and do my job while the decision makers make their decision. Every day, we have a front row seat to Maine history, and it's a variety of topics. And it's one of the most fascinating things that any given day you can talk about insurance, taxes, abortion, snowmobiling, ski resorts, fishing, all these different topics in a single day. And it's pretty interesting to see the different perspectives on how people come to a decision about what we should or should not do. Most people go to Augusta for two main reasons. One is to create good laws, and it's also the antithesis of that is to stop bad laws from becoming laws. And so a lot of people will revolve around those sort of thoughts. And it's not easy. Because these are yes or no questions, there's no maybe. There's no kind of. There's no, well, in this one case, it sounds like a good idea. And the hardest situation is some decisions are cut and dry. But the hardest ones are, let's say there's a bill that is 90% good but 10% bad. Do you vote yes or no? What if it's 80-20? What if it's, 10% is really awesome, but 90% that's terrible? What do you do? Because you can't say maybe or kind of. It's either yes or no. And those are the most challenging decisions for members to make. It is a terribly rewarding job. It's a difficult job. It's very hard to make your constituents happy every single day, but it's a terribly rewarding job. For a lot of folks, when they have trouble with state government, the first person they call is their state representative. And I remember when I was a state representative, one of the most satisfying things was to make a phone call and say, hi, this is Representative Rob Hunt. I got a problem, and be able to solve that problem. I mean, you can't solve everybody's problem, but being able to solve people's problems was very rewarding. And it's a difficult job, but it's a great place to work. And in the House chamber, you'll see so many emotions. You'll see people laugh. You'll see people cry. You'll see people get angry. You'll see a lot of joy. But it's not your usual office. And, sometimes people see how it works in England and they all go boo and yay and that sort of thing. We don't do that in the State House, right? We consider legislation, we vote on legislation, and then we move on. And there's no cheering, there's no clapping, there's no booing. It's pretty cut and dry. And that's by design. Some other states are more like the Wild West. People can do whatever they want. But in Maine, we have a lot of rules. One of the big ones is you're there to talk about legislation, not other people. And so it is against the decorum of the House to call your colleagues jerks or anything like that. You can't impugn their character. You can't question their motives. You can't say he's voting for this because his son's going to get a contract for such and such. Nope, that's out of bounds. What we're talking about is what's good about this bill and what's bad about this bill, and that's it. And it's kind of hard telling people no a lot, but that's sort of where I come in. And
is that your job? If you identify that you think somebody is out of bounds, you have to step in?
So I work with the Speaker of the House, and she presides over the entire operation, and I am an advisor. And I give her the best advice I can. So when somebody calls somebody else a jerk, you'll see me snap my head around as fast as I possibly can when I talk to the Speaker. And, and that brings up another point, is you can watch us every time we're in the House chamber. There's 3 cameras in there. The audio is streamed. Starting 3 years ago, we started doing audio archiving, so you can watch it 24 hours a day. If you get really bored at 3 a.m., we'll put you right to sleep. But, if there's something that's interesting to you, you can look it up by bill number, and you can see what the debate was on that legislation. You can look it up by member and see every time that your member spoke on the House floor. It's a pretty advanced, especially for a state like Maine, pretty advanced archival system that we implemented 5 years ago now. So, but every day is different. And sometimes you expect 0 argument on something and you get about 8 hours argument. And sometimes you expect 8 hours argument and you get like nobody says anything. It's kind of unpredictable that way. And, we will consider in any given 2 years, probably about 2,000 individual law changes. And it's a lot to do. This year was a bigger year. We're up to 2,300 bills. And especially since the legislature is part-time, members serve basically from December to June, and the next year, January to April, and that's it. And this year, the session was truncated. We finished in mid-March. We were supposed to finish in mid-April. So not everything got considered. And it's sort of just hanging out right now until we know whether we're coming back or not. And that's unknown at this point. So, about a third of the bills will make it to the finish line on average. That means they will be accepted by the House, they'll be accepted by the Senate, and they'll be signed or let into law by the governor. And that's the parameters. That's, there's a lot of checks and balances on each chamber. And then there's the ultimate hurdle of the governor. So a lot of parties have to agree in order for something to become a law. And, I always you always hear the statement, the wheels of government move very slowly. Well, that's by design. And it's not an accident. And that's why they're called deliberations, because they're deliberate. And there's a lot of back and forth between the House and the Senate. And the worst thing in the world that could happen is you pass a law, and then you wake up the next morning and go, oops. You can undo it. It's just not easy. And so you want to make sure you're doing the right thing. That being said, with the whole virus crisis, we were able to pass laws very quickly. We have the ability. The fastest I've ever seen a bill become a law is probably 15 minutes. And but that takes a lot of agreement. Everybody's got to be on the same page. All 151 members of the House, all 35 members of the Senate, and the governor all got to agree this is a great idea. And it's not easy. Usually that does not happen. And but that's the whole point, right? You want to make sure the laws you pass are good. And that's what the policy members do. So usually during Girls' Day, we have a bill that you would debate. I think it's number of school days or driving. Handheld devices has been a topic a couple of times during Girls' Day. And the debate's always great. People go back and forth. Some people think it's a great idea. Some people think it's a terrible idea. But at the end of the day, we open up the vote, everybody votes, and we make some sort of group decision. And it's usually a highlight of my time at the State House. Because I used to be a teacher, and it's always fun sort of being an educator again, just in a different way. So that's a little bit about what we do at the Maine House of Representatives. I don't know if you have any questions or anything for me, but I love my job. And it's very demanding at times. Other times it's nice and easy. We're kind of in the slow time right now, it being May. But it's, especially towards the end of the session, it's a very demanding job. I've been in the chamber. I've seen the sun set in the west, and I've seen it rise in the east in the same day. The last day of the session, the first regular session, we started at 10 a.m. and we adjourned the next day at 8 a.m. So we saw the sun rise, but we did get our work done in a timely fashion. We only had to extend for 8 hours, which is the closest to on time we've been in close to a decade. And except for this time, we finished a month early. So there you go. But,
The work's not over yet for this session.
No, not over yet. Not over yet.
That was one of the questions that I had, was how long, because once you start working toward the end of the session, you're, like trying to catch a runaway horse. Like,
yeah.
How long have you ever been at in a session?
Oh, well, one of the longest times, that might have been the longest in terms of like a sheer number of hours,
Yeah.
from to 10 a.m. one day to 8 a.m. the next day. That was a really long day. I find the older I get, it's harder to recover from that sort of thing, staying up all night. But, it's like school, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Once it's done, it's done. And then you can go on summer break or whatever it is. And now we still come back and go to work, but it's not the same level of intensity as when the members are there. During the shutdown of a couple years back, we shut down the government for a few days, which meant it wasn't a session per se, but I was at the State House for 18, 19 hours a day for 5 or 6 days. I basically go, luckily I have a camp near Augusta and Belgrade, so I'd go there and spend 3-4 hours. It was 4th of July weekend. It's very nice. And then I'd go back to the Capitol, and I'm wearing a collared shirt today. This is like dress down day for me. Usually I wear a suit or bow tie or something like that. And so it suits every day, even in July. And but that was a long stretch, because it was unknown what was going to happen. And I think we shut down for like 3 days or something like that. I think July 3rd we managed to get it open. I mean, because it doesn't sound like a big deal shutting down government, except you need to have people who, let's take fireworks, for example. You couldn't sell fireworks because there were no inspectors. And so there'd be no fireworks on the 4th of July. And a lot of the supermarkets had to have people come through to make sure they were doing what they need to do. And so they couldn't open. And so it was going to manifest itself to a big deal as you got closer to the 4th of July. And so pressure was put on people, and they came to some sort of agreement, about the budget. The budget is the only thing we have to pass every 2 years, otherwise the government shuts down. Everything else is just a good idea, but the budget you do have to do. The state is constitutionally bound to have a balanced budget. And if you don't balance the budget, you can't move forward. And so unlike our federal colleagues who can keep borrowing money, we can't do that. We have to live within whatever our money box is, if you will. So.
Well, I do have a few questions for you. We actually asked for questions from our Girls' Day participants.
Great.
And so let's see. And I have a few questions also because I'm really interested in all of the rules and the process.
Mm-hmm.
And so you mentioned that you're the parliamentarian, and so that means you help keep order and manage the rules. How do you train for something like that? Where do you get that information from?
I get that question a lot. And, nobody goes to college and goes, when I grow up, I want to be a parliamentarian. I mean, none of my colleagues across the nation. And a fun fact about clerks and secretaries, there's only 99 of us in the country. And the reason there's only 99 of us is because of Nebraska. Nebraska is unicameral. They'll have one chamber, whereas every other state will have 2. And so there's only 99 clerks and secretaries across the nation. And we do get together. In fact, the conference was scheduled to be in Portland, Maine this year, but it's unknown at this point whether we're going to have it. Last year was in Seattle, and then the year before was in Madison, Wisconsin. And so we do get together. And almost to a person, you just sort of fall into it. You start working in one of the offices, and you work your way up, and then the opportunity opens up, and you get and it for different states there's different criteria. For a lot of states you're appointed, and for other states you're elected. I'm elected. In Maine, the clerk and the assistant clerk are elected by the body itself, and so every 2 years I'm up for re-election. And it's a little unnerving because every 2 years you could lose your job, but it's unlike, my brother always said, well, it's not like the corporate world where you can lose your job every year. So I'm signed up for 2 years. But still, it's nerve-wracking. This November will be a little nerve-wracking for me to see whether I have a job or not. But you just sort of fall into it. You just, I was a member for 4 years, so I thought I had a general idea about the job. And then I had a friend who was going to be Speaker of the House, and he asked me if I wanted to be assistant clerk. And I said, I don't really know what the job does, but sure. And so I signed up to be assistant clerk. I was elected assistant clerk in 2012. And I trained under my predecessor, Millie McFarland. And she had been clerk of the house for a decade or so. And she was extremely wise. And she had been the president of the Clerks and Secretaries Society at one point, and an excellent, excellent trainer. And so I learned from her. And then, unfortunately, the plan was for me to take over after 2 years, but unfortunately she died. And so I took over a little bit more earlier than I expected. But she was a tremendous teacher. And so I started training that way. Luckily, from when I went from assistant clerk to clerk, we had the same speaker for both those, for when I was assistant clerk and regular clerk. And then we got a new speaker. But luckily, I had 2 years of being clerk under my belt before I had to train a new speaker to be Speaker of the House. And Sarah Gideon has been Speaker for 4 years now. And so initially, for any speaker, I have to turn around and sort of coach them through things and that sort of thing. But I don't have to worry about that anymore, which is great because I can focus on my job. Sometimes I have to focus on multiple pool jobs in the State House while I'm doing mine. So, but you just sort of fall into it. I mean, that's a long-winded answer that, it's all about circumstances and timing. And, there are a lot of rules, and you can tell from the shirt and the haircut, I'm okay with a lot of rules and I'm happy to follow them. I'm not a wild and crazy guy. So, it was the right fit for me. I get to lead an organization. I get to be part of the process, but I don't have to argue, which is great. I'm at the center of government, so I know what's going on, which I really enjoy. But I can also leave it at the office and go home. And so it is a really fascinating job, and something I never expected to do ever in my life. So,
as the keeper of the rules, what do you do when you don't know the rules? Or do you find that happens less and less the longer you do your job?
Yeah, that's happening less and less as time goes on. There's everybody always tells you there's no replacing experience, and that's true. I mean, it's always hard when you're starting out and you want to get the experience, but nobody will give you the shot. But when you get the experience, you understand that experience is very important. I rarely get flustered. I've heard most of the arguments over and over again. Occasionally there's a curveball, but if that's the case, you just stop what you're doing and you figure it out. There's people who are always intimidated with pausing. They want to have an immediate answer, but sometimes the immediate answer is not the right one. So there's no shame in saying, all right, we're going to take about a 5-minute break and I'll figure it out. Because I got, I don't have it here, but in my office, I have a big rule book. It's called Mason's Manual of Parliamentary Procedure. There's a hierarchy. First you go to the Constitution, then you go to the House rules, then you go to the joint rules, and then you go to this, manual, if you will, about how to figure this stuff out. And like I said, most of the stuff I've seen now a couple of times, and it's rare that something will pop up I don't, understand. But the hard part is when you take 6 months off and then you go back and do it, you get a little rusty. So it takes you a couple of weeks at the beginning of the session to get back. So
you're only, as the clerk of the house, you're only working there and staff there when they're in session. And
no, we're there all year.
Or you're there all year.
Yeah, so we're there all year because the members will scatter.
What do you do? Yeah, what do you do in the off months?
I always equate it to the TV show Downton Abbey on it was on PBS, and this might be more my generation who watched it, but there was some of the staff, the butler, Mr. Carson, that's my job. I set up the dinner, I cook the dinner, I put it on the table, and I clean up the mess afterwards. And that's what we do. So we set the table before session, get everything all lined up. The members come in, they have the meal, and then at the end, we clean up the mess and get ready for the next session. And so it's not a mess, but we just tidy up. We in the off session, we are constitutionally bound to produce a journal. And so we will journal every single day. And there are these big volumes that we have, and we transcribe the debate verbatim, and then we edit it, and then we put it in these big journal/records. They're available online, and they're for the public to see what the deliberations were like. So we put those together, and that takes a long time. And we have to index it, like 4 different indexes, so it's cross-referenced and all this other stuff. And then we also upgrade our computer systems, fix the desks, fix the chairs, get the place cleaned, all these other things that go into maintaining the institution. We take great pride in the institution, and we do all the personnel stuff. We pushed off for 6 months because we're working so hard. So, all those sort of management things that we would normally do. So it keeps us pretty busy. It's not as intense as when we're in session. The demands there are tremendous, but we are busy all year round, and we have a full-time staff. And, we manage the mail program, and then members every year can have a newsletter. So we edit those and send those out, and make sure they're complying with the policies and that sort of thing. It's kind of, it's a lot more relaxed, but there's plenty to do when the members aren't there. So
you probably make it home to dinner most nights.
Oh yeah, it's the off season,
Unlike at the last month of the session.
Yeah, it's very unpredictable at the last few weeks of session are very unpredictable. It drives my family crazy because sometimes I go to work and then I call at 4:30 and say, I'm not coming home tonight. I'll see you tomorrow. And that's just the nature of the job. And we know what we sign up for. We know that when they're in that room, the big chamber, we're there too. And we'll be there a couple hours after they're done to get ready for the next day. My office is also responsible for producing the calendar, which is sort of a script or play-by-play of what's going to happen the next day. And so let's say we're there until midnight and they're going to come in the next day. We need to make the calendar and get it ready for the next day so people know what's available and what could be discussed on the next day. So they're a little bit prepared before we go into session. So,
wow. So, it sounds like the staff are really the folks who make sure the process works.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, you have to figure members are only there for 4 terms. There's term limits. And so the first term, they're really trying to figure it out and they do a great job. And then they get a little bit more comfortable and that sort of thing. And then there's the third term, assuming you keep winning your election, right? And then your last term, you finally get an idea of how the place works and what you can do and what you can't do and that sort of thing. And then you're termed out. And so then we get a whole new batch of folks that come in. So whether it's good or bad, I'm not allowed to express my opinion. But, that is the reality, is that you have this transference of knowledge. And so the staff is very important because they are the custodians of that knowledge. You can't expect somebody walking off the street to understand everything about the institution. So it's our job to sort of say, well, that seems like a good idea, but it was rejected the following 12 times because of these reasons, so maybe you don't want to do that. You can if you want, you're the policymaker, I'm not, but maybe you don't want to do that. So
when everything is working really well in the house, in the chamber, what contributes to that? Clearly you and your staff are there doing your jobs, but sometimes it probably feels like it's really working well. It feels good. And what are the things that contribute to that?
Well, I think, communication is always the key. And for a speaker, you want to be consistent and fair. Above anything else, just be consistent and fair. The way you interpret the rules, just be consistent about it and be fair about it. If somebody, doesn't matter what the party they are, if somebody makes that mistake, you got to call them out on it. Because as soon as you let people start getting away with stuff, that becomes the new normal. And so, what do you want your legacy to be as speaker? Do you want to be, haphazard and unruly, or do you want to be consistent and fair? Just think about it logically. Things work really well when people communicate with each other, most notably with them members. Nobody at the State House, to a person, likes surprises. Nobody wants to be caught flat-footed Nobody wants to be blindsided, and nobody likes surprises. So if you drop some sort of legislation that you're going to pass outright that nobody's seen, you could the wheels will fall off the bus real quick. So my advice is don't spring surprises. If you're going to do something, tell them about it. And then they might squabble, but you told them, so at least you were forthright. But nobody likes surprises. So usually if there's good communication, with 151 members, most of the communication goes through the leaders, the various parties, the speaker, the majority leader, the assistant majority leader, the minority leader, and the assistant minority leader. If they communicate fairly regularly and well, and don't throw surprises in front of people, things work really well. We can accomplish a lot. That last night of session this year, we passed 85 new laws, which is a lot in a day. Doesn't sound like a lot, but there's multiple steps for each bill. And for staff, it was very taxing because, every time a bill goes through a different step, it's got to go through a different office where there are actual people putting it together. And so you can imagine all these 85 bills going through all these offices over and over and over again. And then finally getting to the finish line. It was a very long day. So no lunch, no dinner that day, that sort of thing.
Yikes. So what do you think are your sort of last messages you would want to share with the Girls' Day participants?
Well, I think, as daunting as it seems, this is a citizen legislature. People come from all walks of life. We have teachers, we have doctors, we have lawyers, we have people who are retired, we have people who own businesses, we have people who are fishermen, we have a couple lobstermen, So they're from all walks of life, and these are the people who are making your laws. But that doesn't mean it can't be you. I mean, people come from all over, and they can sit in those chairs, and they can pass laws. And I think, I presume with all the Girls' Days we've had that somebody was sitting in those chairs and is now a member. I don't know for sure, but I would suspect it's a real possibility. There's 151 members, so it's a big number. Your members are accessible, unlike other states. You think about California, where the representatives, you represent a district of 100 million and a half people. Rarely do you actually get to speak to your state representative, whereas, in a normal time, your state representative would go knock on every single door in the district and say hi. But for some very young folks, I'm a parent, I have a daughter. These are achievable goals. You can be in that chamber if you so wish. Usually when my candidates, and I've met a lot of candidates, the only thing stopping the candidate is them. Right? They don't want to go meet 9,000 people. Well, makes it hard. But if you have the will and the desire, there's a good shot that many of you could be a state representative at some point. It's a little bit harder in the Senate. Their districts of 35,000 people, something like that. So it's a much bigger campaign. But for the House district, you're talking about 3,000 households maybe, which is a lot. It's no laughing matter, but it's achievable. So
nice. Well, thank you. This was really interesting. I learned
Sure.
some things.
Well,
and I'm really glad you could join us.
I love sharing about the State House. It's a fabulous institution. We welcome visitors all the time. We have a gallery in the chamber, so we want people to show up and take a peek. It's closed now, of course, but like I said, you can watch online. We do have a page program at the State House. You can imagine if the 151 people, if they want to talk to each other, get real loud. So we have this internal note passing system, sanctioned, authorized note passing system, where if a member hits their page button, they have a page button on their desk, it lights up down front and somebody goes and gets a note and passes it. And a lot of kids will come up to the State House and do that. All you have to do is contact your state rep and schedule a day, and you can be an honorary page and run around the House floor while people are doing their business. So
how fun.
Yep.
Well, I'll be sure to include some pictures of the chamber and link to the page system on our Girls' Day page.
Yeah. Well, it's always a highlight having the girls. It's usually on a Friday or something like that, and it's kind of a slow day, and then all of a sudden there's a lot of chatter in the hallways, and it brings a little bit of energy and life to the building. So.
Yeah, I'm sure. All right, well, thank you. I'm going to click this off, but I really appreciate you joining.
Happy to join you.